I'm Dennis Reardon, president of Mononkatuk Audubon Society, and welcome to this evening's community program. As usual, Mononkatuk wishes to honor the indigenous communities native to the chapter area, and they include Pagusset, Wepawag, Quinnipiac, Tataket, Mononkatuk, and Hammonasset peoples. As we advocate for the conservation of the land and its wildlife, we're indebted to the work of the native and indigenous people who cherished the land for thousands of years before European colonization. I want to draw your attention to a few things that are coming up. Urbanscapes Native Plant Nursery is open on Saturdays from 9:30 till noon until school lets out, and then it'll be open on Tuesdays and Thursdays as well with the same hours. Because of World Migratory Bird Day on Saturday, where we'll be at East Rock Park, at College Woods at East Rock Park from 11:30 to 2:30. The nursery will be closing at 10:30. At the World Migratory Bird Day, we'll have a lot of fun events, including a live raptor show at 12:30. So I hope you can join us there. And then at the end of the month on Wednesday, May 24th, Corey Folsom O'Keefe will tell us how we can share the shore to protect shorebirds with their nesting. So we're excited to have Gina Nichol back. As you know, she leads bird trips in Connecticut, other parts of the US, and throughout the world through her company Sunrise Birding. And she brings back from her trips exciting programs, and we're going to have the opportunity to see one of them tonight. During the program, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat or save them for the end when you can unmute yourself. Meanwhile, please stay muted. And with that, welcome, Gina.
So much, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here and see all of you virtually. And I'm glad that so many people are interested in seeing birds and seeing them well. And that's the topic of my talk tonight. So let me see if I can share my screen. Looks like I can. And we will get started.
Got it.
Okay, how's that look? Okay, great.
We're in, there we go.
Yeah, okay, there's a little delay, I think. Anyway, the topic of my talk is how to get better views of birds. But before I get into it, I wanted to update you on a talk that I gave back in May of 2020, which is 3 years ago, on chasing wild cats. I don't know, some of you may remember that, but I have exciting news. During that talk, I told you there were some most wanted cats in the wild that I wanted to see. And in February, I got to see finally Canada lynx, actually 3 Canadian lynx in Superior National Forest in Minnesota. So that's just a quick update on my cat watching. But let's talk about bird watching. This is a talk that I put together many years ago, I guess. And it was mainly for people who go on our tours and have trouble seeing birds in the field. And the original name of it was Fieldcraft for Birders, but it wasn't very popular to call it Fieldcraft. So I changed the name to How to Get Better Views of Birds. But really what I'm going to talk about is how to behave in the field to increase your chances of getting good looks at birds. So I had to figure out what fieldcraft meant, and according to the dictionary, it's the techniques involved in living, traveling, and making military or scientific observations in the field, especially while remaining undetected. Okay, so there's a little bit of a military background for fieldcraft. Birding or bird watching is the observation of birds, either as a recreational activity or as a form of citizen science. And I know that many of you are involved in citizen science projects with bird watching, the Christmas bird count, and other things. So putting the Fieldcraft for birders is the techniques involved in observing birds in the field, especially while remaining undetected. Okay, so why do we watch birds? These are pictures from that movie that came out called The Big Year sometime back. And I love this movie because it sort of portrayed the story of these three guys doing a big year of birding, but and it sort of brought birding into the mainstream as something maybe not quite so weird anymore. But why do we go bird watching? Well, for me, it's to see these beautiful winged creatures that I get a chance to go around the world and see. This is a streamer-tailed tyrant in Brazil, northern emerald toucanet in Costa Rica, and this picture was taken at a bird feeding station. I was eye to eye with this bird coming in for some bananas. And then there are people who like to chase wild birds and build up their life lists, and this is a good old-fashioned British twitch that my Steve and I created some years ago in the Isles of Scilly in England. We found a young scarlet tanager that had made its way across the ocean to show up on the Isles of Scilly, and it was quite a rarity there. So when we reported it, within 15 minutes, there were about 200 people there to see it, and that is definitely a British twitch. These people trying to get this bird on their life list or their British list or whatever list they were working on. For some of us, it's just being in nature and wanting to get close to birds. And this is Liz Helwig. You might know her from the Framed shop in Hamden. She came to Galapagos with us some years ago and got very close to some Galapagos penguins. And that's really, really a thrill. So why do we watch birds? Well, I think we all want to get close to birds. Maybe we want to get close to nature in general. We want to see them up close. We want to know about their lives and observe their behavior. So birding or bird watching to me is a mixture of art, science, skill, luck, frustration, and elation. Art is just the art forms of birds. They are such beautiful creatures. This is a crimson-mantled woodpecker from Colombia. It's just stunning to see. Or the beautiful sunbittern that we see when we go to Central and South America. Or a McGillibray's warbler, this photo taken in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. They all have their own special beauty, and we really love to see them and maybe phone home and tell everybody what we saw. But in birding, there's this thing I call the frustration elation index. Frustration is when you're trying to see a bird and you just can't get your eyes on it. And elation is when you finally get a view of the bird. And this is some people on our trip to winter New England some years ago. And this was how they felt when they saw their life snowy owl sitting on a nest box out in the marsh. So getting views, getting good views, I'm really into getting good views of birds. It takes some work, but in the end, I think it's worth it because you can get incredible looks at the art of nature. So with Fieldcraft, the idea is to lower the frustration and raise the elation of bird watching. And that makes us all happy. This is a tour that we took several years ago to Panama, and we're finally getting back to Panama later this year with our friend Carlos Bethencourt. But it's always fun when you see good birds. So now I have a couple of disclaimers. I hate disclaimers, but I have to put them in. And disclaimer number one is, but Gina, I did what you said and it didn't work. I didn't get a good view of that bird. And so I guess what I'll say to that is birding is art, science, skill, luck, frustration, and elation. It's a battle of wits. You're trying to see a creature that doesn't necessarily want you to see it. And they're wild creatures, and they're going about their business trying to stay alive. Our Polish guide says it's nature, not a zoo. And I really feel like it's a privilege if a bird allows you to get a close view of it. So disclaimer number 2 is this is serious stuff we're talking about here. Maybe too serious. Everything I learned about birding, I learned from the British. Well, not everything, but a lot of I learned about birding, I learned from the British, because I spend a lot of time with British people birding, and they are very serious about their birding, and they've taught me a lot about how to be more serious, how to make my birding more meaningful, and how to get better views of birds. So I hope that you'll be able to take some things away from this. Some of the stuff I tell you may sound a little crazy, but hopefully there'll be some tidbits that help you improve your strategies and your success in wildlife observation. So one of the strategies for wildlife observation is to bring the birds closer to you. And that's what this gentleman did by putting a little bit of rice from his lunch on the table so that a summer tanager would come in and pick it up off the table. This picture was taken in Big Bend National Park in West Texas. And of course, many of you probably put out food for birds like they do at this lodge in Brazil's Pantanal. And that brings the birds in to eat the food and allows us to get closer to them. So you might put out suet for your downy woodpeckers in winter, or sunflower seeds or safflower for the beautiful northern cardinal. But when you're feeder watching from your house, you're actually probably using some fieldcraft techniques. For example, at my house out on my deck, I find if the lights are on inside my living room, the birds see me moving around and they fly away, they get scared away. But if I turn the lights off inside so the birds can't see in, I can get better views of the birds. And if I move around slowly and carefully inside, again, I can get better views of the birds. So I even employ fieldcraft when I'm watching my home feeders. But in the field, it's different. In the field, we have vegetation, bushes and trees and obstacles to seeing the birds. And it can really be frustrating to get a good look at a bird. So I'm going to talk about why it's so hard to get close to birds, some equipment that will help you, some clothing that can help you, preparation, some field skills, how to act alone or in groups, and I'll talk a little bit about calling birds in to get close to you. So why is it so difficult to get close to wild birds? Well, today I was out in Branford Supply Ponds, and the warblers that are coming through in migration now were at the top of the trees feeding on insects among the foliage. So they were 40 to 60 feet away from me in the treetops. And these are little birds that are about the size of the leaves that are slowly coming out. So they're hard to see. So the view you want of the black-throated blue warbler is on top here. But the view you get, and this is even a pretty good view because this tree wasn't so high, but it's like this. Okay, so it tends to be hard as the leaves come out to see birds. But another reason that it's so hard to see wild birds is they hide. Can you see the screech owl sitting in this tree against the trunk of perhaps a maple tree where it blends completely in? So you could walk right by this bird and not even see it. And lots of birds try to blend in. They blend into their environment. This is a rock ptarmigan in Alaska, sort of has some brown mottled plumage, as well as some white plumage to blend into its background. Why? Why do they do this? Well, birds want to survive. They want to survive and reproduce. And so they're not really out there for our enjoyment. They're out there to do a job, and that's to survive and raise chicks and move on with the species. So these are some rufous-tailed hummingbird chicks we found in a nest in Costa Rica. They're just about ready to leave the nest. They're just bursting out of the nest. So there's a lot of predators out there too, so want to stay hidden. There's all kinds of raptors everywhere. This is a gray hawk in Costa Rica looking for a bird meal, but also cats. And as you probably know, outdoor cats kill a lot of birds. And this is one of my cats I used to have, which was always an indoor cat. But there are a lot of predators out there, and birds need to hide and survive by avoiding predators. There are also fewer birds to see, and we've seen report after report about the declines in bird populations. And we're all very well aware of that, especially in this group, that birds are declining. Things all over the world, like the Juan Fernandez fire-crowned hummingbird, which exists on only one island off the coast of Chile. It's critically endangered. And so as birders, we have to be involved in the protection of birds. We have to do things that help the birds survive. And we can do a lot of things. We can protect habitat. We can keep our cats inside. We can cut down on pesticides and rodenticides. We can plant native plants. We can reduce and pick up trash. And these are all things we can do in our own lives to protect birds. And there are lots of organizations, and especially I'm proud to be associated with Mononkatuk Audubon that does so much for conservation. So thank you for being a part of this amazing group. So let's move on to talk about equipment for Fieldcraft. And this is a cover of Birding Magazine. I'm not sure it was a real cover of the American Birding Association, but it came out when that movie came out, The Big Year. And it talks about equipment. And of course, the main equipment that you use for bird watching is binoculars. And these binoculars are way too big for this kid, but this is the fake pair of binoculars they have at the Cape Cod General Store that everybody can play with and get their picture taken with. But bigger binoculars are not necessarily better. And for binoculars, it's personal. Generally, the more you spend, the better the optics you'll get. Maybe not quite, but if you think of a good pair of binoculars, they're going to cost you a bit, but the optics are quite good. Now, I put a link to a whole bunch of resources for Fieldcraft, and one of the resources is this Audubon Guide to Binoculars. If you're thinking of getting a pair, this is a really good read. Of course, you can't read it on the screen here, so that's why I gave you the link to that, so you can check it out. But basically, since I got my first pair of binoculars in 1982 or 3, the mid-range binoculars have gotten a lot better. How much do you need to spend? Well, I spoke to Jerry at the Audubon shop today, and he confirmed that there's more difference between a $40 to $250 pair of binoculars than there is between a $250 to $1,000 pair of binoculars. So basically, if you can get into that sort of mid-price range, you can get a pretty decent pair of binoculars. And of course, Jerry at the Audubon shop will help you. Jim's at the Fat Robin will help you. They're really good resources if you're thinking about getting a pair of binoculars. There are different powers of binoculars, and that has to do with the magnification. There's 7 power, 8 power, and 10 power, and as the number goes up, the magnification goes up. I like the 8 power binoculars, 8x binoculars. The 10s are a little bit heavier and harder for me to hold steady. So again, it's a personal thing. You need to get binoculars in your hands and see how they feel and hold them and see how they're going to work for you. So you want to get a good pair that fits your feel. You want central focus. They used to make binoculars where each barrel focused separately, and I never really understood that. And one thing to consider is if you look at butterflies or bugs or anything like that, you may want to consider a pair of close focus binoculars, because regular binoculars, the focus may be 9 to 12 feet, and that's pretty far to see a butterfly. And since you're going to be outside, you want to make sure your binoculars are weatherproof or waterproof. You want to keep them clean. They always come with a lovely little silk cleaning cloth. And you want to make sure that they're adjusted properly. And there are actually 3 different adjustments with binoculars. There are the interpupillary distance, which is the distance between your eyes, the diopter, which I'll talk about, and then the main central focus. So you need to make sure when you have your binoculars that you've done all of these three focusing adjustments for your binoculars. So the interpupillary distance is easy. You just push the barrels apart until they're the right distance for your eyes. It's the diopter that a lot of people don't understand and don't adjust. And the diopter is a little bit of an adjustment. It's usually on the right barrel of your binocular. It's got a plus or minus or maybe even more markings. And that adjusts for the difference between the strength of your two eyes. And so that has to be adjusted or your binoculars will never be in focus. Now there's a nice video that I have linked to that resource page that tells you how to adjust your binoculars. But basically the key is you have both eyes open, you're looking through the binoculars, you're covering the right eye, you're focusing with the main focus, you're leaving that alone, then you're pulling out the diopter, covering the left eye, focusing that until the image is clear, and then you're snapping the diopter into place, and then your binoculars are adjusted for the difference in your two eyes. Okay, so if you didn't get that, don't worry. It's a YouTube video, which is great, that shows you how to do it. And most people, when they get binoculars, they don't do that. They think there's something wrong with the binoculars and they never get a clear view. So really definitely want to make those adjustments. And then with your binoculars, practice, practice, practice. I like to look at things that are still to check my binoculars, things that aren't moving, not a bird that's flying away, but something you can really focus on, see the details, see the edges, but practice using them on anything and everything. So when you're in the field, you want to look for motion and spot the bird or spot the motion before you lift your binoculars. So it helps you get on the bird. It's in your eyesight, and then you lift your binoculars up to see it, and then focus. When you lift your binoculars, don't take your eyes off the bird. Keep your eyes on the bird, lift the binoculars so you're still seeing it. And I always know if something's especially far away, I note other features that are obvious near the bird. For example, this sharp bill is perched on a diagonal, like a 45-degree diagonal branch. So if my eyes go off the bird a little bit, I can find that branch and find the bird again very quickly. So spotting scopes. Spotting scopes are another piece of equipment that can really enhance your views of birds. And Pete Dunn says, when you consider getting a spotting scope, you are poised to cross a threshold in birding. So, but why use a spotting scope? Well, of course, all these birders are looking at a bird, and you look in your scope, and this is what they're looking at. It's going to give you better views of birds. This is a fork-tailed flycatcher that showed up in Stanford several years ago. And I love scope birding. I take my scope all the time because I love close views of birds. This is a great jacamar in Panama, and this is a picture I took through my scope with my camera, and now I'm using my phone to take pictures through the scope. So the British, this is a British group, usually all of them or many of them in a group will bring scopes. They're very serious, as I told you, and scopes are a good way to see birds well. And you get much better views of things like Magellanic plovers on the ground, blending into their background, but with a scope, it helps you see them better. Sometimes we have groups where only one person or nobody brings a scope, and then we have a little bit of scope pressure and frustration as people wait in line to get their view in the scope. So with spotting scopes, there's a little bit more equipment involved. You have the scope itself, the ocular or eyepiece, the tripod that holds up the scope, and the head of the tripod. So there's a little more commitment there and a little more equipment. And how much do you need to spend? Well, anywhere from $300 to $4,000. Again, the more you spend, the better your optics are going to be, but that's a lot of money to spend on a scope. And there are decisions that you have to make. Do you want a fixed focus or a scope that will zoom in? And I actually have both. I have a 32 fixed focus and a 25 to 50 zoom scope. You have to decide if you want an angled scope or a straight scope. These are all angled scopes in the picture. You want to get the best optical quality you can afford. You want to make sure it's as lightweight as possible so you don't mind carrying it. And you also want it to be weatherproof. So for fixed versus zoom, I've had both, and I love my Leica 77, which is in this picture. I've had it for about 20 years and it weighs a ton, but it's a 32 fixed and I really like it. I find a wide angle scope is best for locating birds. And then if you do get a zoom, you can zoom in to get a closer look at the bird. And again, Audubon has a guide to spotting scopes. It's linked on that page, that Fieldcraft page, and you can read about the options and figure out what it is you want. And that's the kind of thing you can look at through a scope, a turquoise Cotinga in Costa Rica. You'll also need a tripod to hold the scope up, and you don't want to skimp on that. You need something strong enough to hold your scope, but it's got to be lightweight and sturdy, and it's got to be able to stand up to wind, because often when you're out birding, it might be windy. You don't want the scope to blow over. And you want to get a scope that's easy to carry and use. There are backpack things you can get to carry your scope, and it makes it just a little bit easier to carry your scope in the field. And again, when you get your scope, practice, practice, practice. Practice on things that don't move. Practice lining a bird up in the scope. Practice focusing. Practice, practice, practice. So we use scopes a lot on our tours, especially when we have open habitats that we're birding. And we were in Colombia several years ago, and we kind of figured out the impact of scopes on birds, or one of the potential impacts. So here is Steve looking through a scope. He's looking at me. And when I look back at him, what I see in the scope is this enormous eye. So that's what the bird sees, is this big eye looking at them. And probably the bird's okay with that. It probably doesn't get too freaked out. But here they are again in the field, and Steve is looking through the scope. But watch what happens when he steps away from the scope. When he steps away, the light rays coming from behind him form a beam of light that illuminate the bird, the subject in the scope. And often what happens is when you step away from the scope, the bird flies away. Well, that's because it's just had a spotlight put on it, so it can scare them away. So we learned this in the field, and it was amazing how bright that beam of light was. And we figured out why birds were flying away. So now when we share the scope with other people, we try to cover the eyepiece there until the next person steps up so that we don't inadvertently scare the bird away. Other pieces of equipment that you need are, of course, field guides, and there are many, many to choose from. There's some amazing apps that are coming out, the Merlin app. There's a lot of talk about that now. Audubon has an app. David Sibley has an app. There's a million apps. eBird is very popular right now. And some people still do take notebooks out in the field and write notes. I don't see anybody anymore with a voice recorder, but I use a voice recorder when I'm doing bird surveys so that I'm more accurate in my counts. This is kind of going the way of the iPhone or the mobile phone. All right, switching gears to clothing. What do you wear in the field? This is, again, a picture from the movie. It was quite comical to see what they wore in the field. This is one of our groups. I believe this was Papua New Guinea several years ago. And our people wear all sorts of things in the field. You have to, of course, dress for the conditions and the habitat that you're going to be in. And everybody here is, I forget where this was, but looks like Colombia. It was quite rainy that day. But your clothing has to be practical, waterproof, comfortable, functional, unobtrusive, and non-rustling. And so there's our model Steve wearing one of the big leaves he found in the forest. But There's this book that came out several years ago called Good Birders Don't Wear White. And it's quite a nice, easy reading book, tips from America's top birders. But the thing about wearing white in the field has been studied and has been shown to impact birds. And why is that? It's because white is a warning color in nature. Think of the white-tailed deer that flashes its white tail when it's running away. This is a note from a British tour company that's telling the people traveling with them that in forests they have to wear dull, dark colors. So I spent a lot of time watching people in forests going birding, and this is in Costa Rica. The guide who's in the middle with the backpack is taking this couple into Carrara National Park, and of course she's got a white t-shirt on, and so does the guide. So I was playing with it to see what the difference would be if they were wearing darker colors. So I just sort of colored their socks and shoes green, and you can see how much less obvious they are walking if they're not wearing white. So the British company goes on to say that it doesn't want you to wear yellow, red, pink, orange, or white in the field. It wants dull, dark colors. And it even goes on to say, don't wear khaki in the field. They're talking about forest birding. I mean, we wear khaki when we do safaris and things. But, you know, that was a little bit over the top, I thought. Don't wear khaki in the field. That's what khaki is made for. But I started looking at groups again, and you can see the people that are wearing the lighter colors are still much more obvious. So I was wearing my dull colors in Brazil one time, and a client asked me if I was birding or in deep mourning, because I'm always in the darker clothes. And this picture, early morning in Uganda, you can see Steve has a khaki shirt on, but over here somewhere is the guide who's wearing all dark green, and he blends in incredibly. So there is something to the color, but I think the main takeaway is good birders don't wear white. So again, your clothing, also you want to try and get quiet clothing, waterproof, windproof, but rustle-free clothing. And that's hard to find. You can find that at hunting shops, but then you end up in camo. But in England, there's a company that makes quiet, rustle-free clothing for bird watchers. So let's go on to preparation, how you're going to prepare to go birding and get good views of birds. The eyes see only what the mind is prepared to comprehend, says Henri Bergson. And I say the key to getting better views of birds is to know and understand your quarry. So that means doing your homework. And there's so many great resources to learn about birds. This is the Connecticut birds distribution by status and season. It's just been updated. This came out in 2005, and now there's one in 2023. And the great thing about this is it goes through every species that's possible in the state and then tells you what month they're possible and how abundant they will be in that month. So it really can give you a good idea of what's around when. Frank Gallo just redid this based on eBird and other data. And Frank Gallo also came out with Birding in Connecticut a few years ago, which talks about several of the top birding spots in Connecticut. So again, there's lots of resources, lots of information out there, loads of field guides, and read your field guide. Go through your field guide before you go out in the field. And I would say in the field, resist the urge to take out your field guide. Observe the bird, get all the field marks and things, give it a good look, and make notes, and then identify it later if you're not sure what it is. So you'll learn that some species are habitat specific. For example, all those migrating, not all the migrating warblers, but many of where in the habitat to look for birds. And you can even find out what's around now. You can go to eBird and see what somebody saw. You can see what I saw in supply ponds today. I posted an eBird list. You can see it all there. There's this amazing thing called Birdcast. It's coming out of Cornell, which predicts or counts somehow where birds are coming through the country and how many birds are flying over every night. Birdcast.info. It's an incredible resource. It doesn't mean the birds are landing in your backyard, but you can get a sense of what migration is doing over the course of the next few weeks. There are, of course, listservs and forums and e-lists that can send you out notifications of birds that are around. So there's a lot now with technology that you can use to make your plan for birding. Time of day is quite important. As you probably know, the morning is best for most birding. That's why I'm called sunrise birding. Everybody asks if I have to go out at sunrise every day. I'd like to, but I don't usually get up that early. But anyway, the morning is when birds are most active, except for shorebirds, which can be active depending on the tide. And a good time to go birding for shorebirds is about 2 hours after high tide. You want to think about the habitat you're going to, the weather conditions, things like that when you're making a plan. So where will the birds be? Well, where is the food? Flowering and fruiting trees are a good source of food for birds, so often you'll find things there. Is it a windy day? Find the sheltered spots. The birds want to get out of the wind as much as we do if they can. Is it a cold day? Find the sunny sheltered spots. So think about the conditions of where you're going. And what I do a lot now is just stop, stay still, and listen, because there's so much birdsong out there now. And a lot of people saw me standing still on the trails at supply ponds today, trying to get a sense of what was there and trying to see it. So the birds are definitely making noise. And so watch and try to get a bead on where the sounds are coming from. So this is a picture of a keel-billed motmot that I took a few years ago in Costa Rica. And this is a pretty good bird for Costa Rica. There's this one road we go to, and usually we can hear them calling and finding them. But the problem with keel-billed motmots is they sit in one place and call. And you can see by that color scheme that they can be hard to pick out of the foliage. So we were scanning the forest, and all at once I saw something drop straight down from a branch. And I followed the path of where it came from, and it was the keel-billed motmot sitting on a branch. It had pooped. I noticed that it had pooped and followed that line straight up to find the bird. So whatever works, use it. To spot birds, you want to notice oddities in the landscape. You remember Where's Waldo, where you had to find Waldo in the book. He looked different, so you could find him. So look at a landscape like this and say, wow, that tree trunk in the middle looks really funny. Usually they're not bulging at the top. And that's because there is a bird at the top of that tree trunk. It's called a common patu. It's actually on a nest on top of that tree trunk. And we noticed it because of the funny way that it looked in the environment. And of course, listen, the birds are singing. They're telling you where they are. They're communicating with each other, and birdsong is a great way to find birds. So I'm going to just step back on this. I have been using the Merlin bird sound app, which is really amazing. I was using it today at Supply Ponds. And if you download the Merlin app, there's a sound ID, which you can put on, and it will record. It will listen to all the birds that are singing around you, and it will tell you what they are. Incredible. This thing is taking away my job sooner or later, but it was really amazing. And it doesn't always get things right, but neither do I. Last week we were birding up in Mohawk State Park up in Litchfield, and it was picking up a blue-footed booby. So it's not quite there yet, but it's coming. So how close you to a bird depends on many factors. It depends on species. It depends on the location, how easily the bird can get away, whether it wants to get away, how good the feeding is, how tired the bird is, whether it has a nest nearby, and how you behave in the field. So I say move slowly and quietly. Be aware of where you're placing your feet. This is a blackbird on the Isles of Scilly, very friendly blackbird next to someone's foot. Stay on the softer, quieter ground. And a lot of trails, in fact, supply pond trails, there's a lot of stone that's been put down, which makes the trail really nice. But when you walk over that, all you hear is the crunching of the stone. So where I usually stay to the side on the grass if I can, so that I can hear what's going on around me and not make so much noise. Avoid stepping on sticks and leaves, you know, the sound that breaking sticks and rustling leaves make. And don't grab branches or tree trunks. And that's one thing that some people do. They'll, as they walk along, sort of grab trees and hold on to them. It shakes the whole tree, and any birds around are scared away. So essentially, you're stalking birds, and you want to be unobtrusive, non-threatening, stay low, blend in, stay near cover, and move quietly. And photographers know this very well. This is Paul Fusco, who's an amazing photographer. And when he's at the beach, this is Sandy Point in West Haven, he gets right down low to be able to get close and get good photos, get good views and good photos. And this is Harry Bird watching a snow bunting on the Isles of Scilly, and he felt like he wanted to get right down to eye level. You might not do a low crawl to see something, but photographers definitely do. So when you're stalking, you want to keep quiet. You want to avoid things like Velcro zips, candy wrappers, anything that makes noise that's going to scare the birds away. And in the field, you want to avoid directly approaching a bird. You want to move at an angle to the bird. You want to avoid making contact. You want to move slow. You want to avoid fast movements like waving and gesturing. And definitely don't point. That's a no-no for birds. It will scare them away. And you need to keep track of how the bird is reacting to you. What does it react to when you move, or what? What is it like next? Where can it go? You can get ahead of it and head it off, perhaps, to get a closer view. And when things don't work, note what went right and wrong and learn from your approach. So in this case, Steve was going through an open field in a khaki shirt, light colored shirt, approaching, trying to get a pic of this eagle. I think this was a lesser spotted eagle. But as he got close, the bird just didn't like it and flew away. So in the field, in groups, we do a lot of bird walks, we do a lot of tours, and there was a neat article, a funny article really, from a crabby birder that appeared in the American Birding Association magazine. Again, that is linked to the resource page that I told you, but it would be a fun thing, I think, for birders to read. But in the field, you want to pay attention to the leader. So the leader is here pointing things out. People have their scopes, but John is looking in the other direction. Now, there's something to be said for that, because sometimes there's a bird behind you that nobody's seeing. But if he wants to see what the leader is pointing out, he needs to pay attention. Stay close to the leader. If the leader finds something down here, where is the leader here? Somewhere down here. You're going to have to run to see it, and that often means you can miss it. For groups, we ask tall people to stand in the back, shorter people to stand in the front. You don't always have to be in the front. A lot of times you're looking up into the trees, so that seems to work. I take a lot of cues on what other people are doing. I look to see where they're looking, and that helps me get on a bird in a group. Now, giving directions is, if you see a bird and you want to alert other people to where it is, giving directions is an important skill. And so in a forest like this, it's hard to find a way to give directions, but I can see in this particular scene that there's a gap in the forest through to the sky, and there are several sort of horizontal or diagonal branches coming through. So I'm noting features in the landscape that can help me point out a bird. And we use the clock, the bird clock, of course, to give people directions for birds, especially when they're distant. So if you look at this scene, you see a rainbow in the middle. It's very pretty. and then you see an emergent tree out here, and this looks like a lighthouse, and the bird is actually here. So I might say the bird is right of the rainbow, and it's 10 o'clock from the emergent tree that you can see on the right-hand side there, okay? And that is how I'm using the clock to give directions to where a bird is. So owling, I think I've talked about owling, looking for owls with Monunkatuck before, so I won't spend too much time on that. And I think when I do owling, I usually try to find owls during the day on their day roosts. I don't go out and do too much owling at night. And I found some amazing things, including owl nests, which are really fun to watch. But if you do go owling at night, of course, you're going to be quiet. You're going to wear quiet clothing. If you carry a flashlight, point it down until you have something you want to look at. Have necessities to hand so you don't have to fiddle. If you have to look at something quickly, have your binoculars ready. Use playback judiciously, and I'll talk about playback in a minute. And be patient and listen. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be lucky enough to see an owl. Now I'm going to talk about just briefly calling in birds. And that is, what I'm talking about is mimicking bird calls and sounds to get their attention and hopefully draw them closer. And what most people know this as is something called pishing. And Pete Dunn actually wrote a whole book on the art of pishing. So you're in your living room now. I want you to practice some pishing for me. And it's simply, all you have to do is go psh, 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 psh. You're kind of almost making the sound of the pishing. So practice with me. Psh, 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 psh. And that sound kind of mimics actually the scolding call of a tufted titmouse or some bird that's scolding. And it causes other birds to get interested and maybe come in and see what's going on. So pishing and squeaking in the field is really most effective when you are hidden or near cover. If you pish out in an open field, it's not as effective as if you're near trees or a bush or some kind of cover. And as you practice pishing, which I know you will from now on, mix the sounds up a little bit. So I go psh, 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 and then sometimes I go ch, 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 because that's what a wren might do when it's scolding. And just practice pishing and squeaking and see if that doesn't help draw birds in. But note that pishing has some etiquette to it, and it's frowned upon in some places. As a matter of fact, in England, pishing is illegal. Oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. What's going on? Sorry about that. Pishing can be overdone, and pishing can be annoying to other birders. And so you want to use it judiciously. Now, playback is the use of recorded bird sounds to attract birds. And this is our guide in Chile, Enrique. He's using his phone attached to a speaker to call in, I believe this was one of the tapaculos he was trying to get in. And so, as you can see, he's set up to use a recorded bird sound to try and get this bird to come in. Now, again, playback is prohibited in many parks and refuges around the world. So you have to know if you're going to use playback, if it's even legal where you're using it. And it's illegal to use playback to disturb endangered species. So if you're birding in Hawaii, most of the birds there are endangered, most of the native birds, I should say. And so you shouldn't be using playback for endangered species. And some birds just can't or shouldn't be taped. And this is a shoebill in Uganda. I don't think you want to call that one in with playback. So now that everyone has cell phones and apps with the bird calls on it, playback has become very common and very controversial due to questions about disturbance to birds and disturbance to other birders. So go to the experts and see what they say about it. So David Sibley has his website, Sibley Guides, and he has a whole article on the proper use of playback in birding, which is really a good read, again, listed on that resource sheet. And to be most effective and minimize disturbance to birds, Sibley says, have a plan, choose your spot, and know your quarry, and know what you're trying to accomplish. And most birding tour leaders that I know do this. We do see a lot of people just generally birding, and they just keep playing songs from their phone, and probably not too effectively. So he says, don't just play sounds. Have a plan, determine what bird you're trying to get in, and then if you want to call it in, play snippets of sound, maybe less than 30 seconds at a time with a long pause in between. So more silence than playback. And what playback does is it, again, gets the bird interested, maybe gets it to come in and see what's going on. So it gets it to come closer to you. You're trying to be very subtle and tease the bird into the open, or try to get it to come closer to you. And after a few minutes, give it a rest, but stay alert. Because often with owls, you do the playback, and then 15 minutes later, the owl has come in to see what's going on. Sometimes it's not immediate instant gratification. You have to kind of know how the bird is likely to react. You don't want to blast it, although we do have a guide in Brazil who, his name is Ciro, and we call it the Ciro blast. He plays it as loud as possible. It's actually a little bit unpleasant to listen to. So Sibley says, keep the volume low and don't play it continuously. Don't play it loud and continuous. And Bird says, Steve Bird, that is, my partner, says, play the call from a position where the bird has to cross an open area to investigate, and then that gives you a better chance of seeing it. You want to minimize the disturbance to other birders. Maybe announce your intention to play the recording. How many times have you been in the field and someone plays a bird call and you think the bird is right next to you, but it's actually someone playing a call from their phone? And I learned this in Colombia a few years ago. We called a Colombian screech owl, which is this bird on the right. And when we were finished, our guide went over and shook the tree that it was in so the bird would fly away, because the owl's predators might have heard that call and might have come in. And so you don't want to put the bird in a position where it's going to be killed by one of its predators. So he made it fly away. Got it? Got all of this? So basically, Fieldcraft, the main points are you want to know your birds, you want to know their behavior, and you want to be aware of your behavior and how it might impact the birds. And that's basically what Fieldcraft is. Practice on common birds, birds that are easy to get close to. This is an anhenga in Florida. And get out there and gain experience and learn from your experiences. And in the words of the great Frank Kello, go birding. Life is short, bird often. It could be in your backyard, where these birds might be coming through now: blue-winged warbler, prairie warbler, hooded warbler. Or you could travel to other places and see these same birds that are coming through our yard. These pictures of the Blackburnian warbler were taken in Colombia, where they winter. This black-throated blue warbler taken in Jamaica, where they winter. And Tennessee warbler, one of the most difficult birds to see here in Connecticut, feeds on bananas in Costa Rica at bird feeders. So you can also travel, and we'll help you get close to birds. Take a look at that link. I put it in the chat. Hopefully it's still there. It's got all of these things linked that I talked about, and I hope that some of this was helpful to you in your birding, and basically just get out there and enjoy the birds. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. Thank you very much. As usual.
You're welcome.
Questions, anyone? Raise your hand or unmute yourself.
I see some things in the chat there.
Bev.
Oh, you got. Right.
Or was that a clap?
This is Michelle Sorensen.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Gina. I love Merlin, and I've been using it quite a bit, and it's so frustrating to see tons of birds pop up. This morning in my backyard, I had a prairie warbler, a yellow warbler, a red-eyed vireo, a warbling vireo, and I said, where do I start? And so do you have any? So I decided to wait until it told me the bird twice, and then I listened for the sound. Do you have any other tips?
Yeah, I really was using Merlin today in the supply ponds, and yeah, what I was amazed about is it hears a lot more than I do. Because right now there's multiple birds singing at once, and I focus on one, and I realize I did hear that other one, but I didn't note it. You have to just try and follow the sound where it's coming from. And for most of those birds, it'll be high in the treetops. And that's all I can really say at this time of year. I was thinking as I was preparing this talk over the last few days that this is probably one of the hardest times of year to see birds, especially now that the leaves are coming out. You just have to look up in the trees and do your best. Because these birds are just busy feeding. They're going to stay up where the flowers are blooming in the trees, and you just have to do your best. Keep at it. Blair has your hand up? Blair?
Yes, thank you, Gina. When you were talking about clothing, when you were talking about non-rustling clothing, you mentioned that you could go to some hunting clothing, but then you're getting to camo. Is there a problem with camo?
No, I wear camo all the time. My sister calls me Duck Dynasty when I do that. But yeah, I don't mind camo, but then I show up in the grocery store with it and I'm thinking, oh, okay. I love camo. One of my favorite jackets is camo, but no, that's not a problem at all.
I was hoping it wasn't, but just in case.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I have a quick question. If you wanted to use a monocular instead of binoculars, would you still want the same sort of depth of magnification, the 7 times, 8 times, etc., that you were showing before?
Oh, that's a great question. Is that Sarah asking the question?
Hi.
Thank you, Sarah. I honestly don't know anything about monoculars. You would have to go to an expert for that. And I don't even know if the Audubon shop or the Fat Robin sells monoculars. That would be a good question for them, though. I just have never had the chance to use one. However, I have a new toy. Where is it? Oh, it must be downstairs. I have recently acquired a it must be downstairs. A thermal camera, which is basically a monocular that sees heat signatures. And I've been using that sometimes for owling at night. We were able to find a bunch of screech owls, or we were able to count the screech owls on the Christmas bird count with it, because you can at night you see a heat signature of the bird. But that's a monocular. But that's the only thing I've had in my hand that's just one barrel, but quite interesting.
I would just like to chime in there, because when I was young, that was my first purchase, was a monocular, because it was all I could afford. And I used a 7x42, which was excellent.
Okay, that's good to know.
And they do sell them waterproof, and they're very handy for kayaking and birding too.
Oh, right. So where would you get one of those, Michelle?
I would get it online. There are some good people, there are some good brands that sell monoculars.
Okay.
You can get it. You'd want to spend at least $80. You don't want to get a real cheap thing, right? You want to get it, but it's going to be a third the price of a pair of good binoculars, but it's a good entry level.
Yeah, I still check with the Audubon shop and see if they have them, so you can get them in your hands.
Exactly.
Binoculars, you have to make sure it feels right in your hands. But that's a great idea. Thank you for that information.
Excellent. Thank you both.
Anyone else?
Other,
Another great program, Gina. Thank you very much.
thanks, Carl. I hope it was helpful. When I was going through, I did learn a lot from the British, but they're so serious about birding. But it has helped me a lot in my birding. So thought I'd share it. Thank you.
Question in the chat. What about being out in the field? Do birds pick up scents from deodorants or hairspray?
That's a very
Bug-
good question.
Bug spray, bug spray.
Bug spray. Do birds pick up scents? For a long time, it was thought that birds didn't have much of a sense of smell. And now they're finding that birds can smell a lot better than we knew. Wow, if a bird can pick up your scent of bug spray, you're wearing a lot of bug spray. So I don't know, as you get out in the air, all of the odors and things would sort of dissipate more, but I don't think that has an impact on birds. But if someone else knows better, they can tell me.
Yeah, Patrice made a comment that in Botswana, camo is illegal.
Yes, in some places, camouflage is illegal. I think it's Barbados as well, and some African countries. So you have to know that if you're traveling, where it's illegal. Someone said, I think Jeff, there was something in the chat. He thinks everyone should practice my tips to read coded color bands on turns this summer. Yes, that would be a good way to practice spotting things and seeing things well. Thanks, Jeff.
But only if you report them.
Yeah, I think you want it. If you take that much trouble to look at them, you should definitely report them. Good. Any other questions? Yeah, good luck with the Merlin. I know I was skeptical of it, and I know it needs to get better, but it's an amazing tool in the field, especially the sound ID. I was just reading before we started a cautionary tale on the Connecticut birds list about some people who were hearing a yellow warbler, but interpreting it as a prothonotary warbler. So, all of that, including our own ears, are not always perfect. So it's a good cautionary tale, but it's a good tool.
Merlin is already better than it was earlier on. You used to have to record the bird calls and then analyze them, and now it does it instantaneously.
You hit the button and it's listening all the time. It's
and telling
filtering
you
out
what it is in real time, or what it thinks it is in real time.
Yeah, it's really amazing. Yeah. So next comes the binoculars that you click a button and it tells you the species you're looking at. And then I'll have to retire.
So thank you very much, Gina.
My pleasure.
It was
Thank you.
wonderful. And I'm going to copy the chat and I'll send you the good comments that are there. So